What's going on, junkies? It's Brandon Dukeman here with Will Harvey, and today is Multifamily Monday. Thanks for joining us again for our daily episode. But first, before we get started, don't forget subscribe to the show so that way you're not missing any of our Multifamily Mondays or daily episodes. And join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. And now I'm going to turn it over to Will to introduce our multifamily expert for the day.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate that. So today on the show, we have Ellie Perlman. She is the CEO and founder of Blue Lake Capital. She owns and invests in multifamily properties throughout the U.S. And something really cool, she came here to the U.S. with no money, credit, or anything. So she's going to talk all about how she got started and what got her into what she's doing. So with that, Ellie, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Can you just explain to the listeners how you got started and got to where you are today?
Yeah. Hey, Will, hey, Brendan. Really great, being here today. So, as you mentioned, I actually came to the U.S. That was about 5 years ago. I didn't really know anybody here besides the guy who was my boyfriend at the time. And I started from scratch. I left my job in Israel. I started as my career as a commercial real estate lawyer, and then as a property manager. And I was very comfortable and uncomfortable in my overly comfortable position as a W-2. And I said, there's got to be more than this. So I moved to the States, went to MIT and got my MBA degree. And right after that, I moved to California, away as far as possible from Cambridge, which was very, very cold. But yeah, I basically came here with, I didn't know anybody here. I started from scratch. And so when I talk to people that want to do what I do, I say, hey, you have an advantage over me because you were born here, people, right. You have, a good place to start. I started with nothing. I didn't know anybody. And if I did it, I'm sure many, many more can do that if they're dedicated, if they dedicate their life to do, what I do. Maybe it's a bit, it sounds a bit extreme, but if someone is dedicated and focused, they can definitely do what I do. It's not a rocket science.
No, it's definitely not. True. But so what's kind of going back a little bit? What is the difference in the real estate? So obviously you've got a real estate background. You did that in Israel. So what's the difference between American real estate versus real estate in Israel?
Oh, night and day. I mean, we in Israel, we don't have those amazing loans that the U.S. Has here. So we don't have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all those agency loans. Nobody's given me over there. They don't have any program that can give me 3.5-4% interest rates with 3 to 5 years interest only payments. It just does not exist. Also, another difference is that we don't really have a lot of apartment buildings that are owned by individual companies or institutionals that you're able to buy and sell. It's mainly condos. So they look like apartments, but it's mainly condos. So if you're out there looking for 20 unit building, 200 unit building, we don't really have those, we don't really have this product over there. So
you got to buy 200
that's one
condos.
Of the reasons. Yeah, I have to buy 200 condos and knock on 200 doors and convince 200 owners to give me, to sell me their apartment.
Wow.
But just I think just the culture is a bit different there. So people are very bullish on owning a house.
Right.
So we don't have tons of renters.
Got it. So you came here just 5 years ago. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's insane. I thought it was like, I heard you speak at that conference a few months ago, and I thought it was, I thought you had been here for 15 years or so because of all that you've been able to accomplish. You said you went to MIT and you've started this insane company buying multifamily properties. That's wild. You've done all that in 5 years. That's crazy. So how'd you do that?
Yeah. What's
your secret?
What was the first thing you did when you got here? I mean,
First thing I did was actually a road trip from New York to San Francisco.
Oh
It
man, that's
was
rough.
7,000 miles, 30 days, in a car. So that was the first thing that I did. I wanted to see America,
Hmm.
and I was driving for hours on, on a Kentucky road. There are no lights, no stop signs, just bunch of cows and crops and stuff. So that's the first thing that I did when I moved here. Then I started school right away, about 3 to 4 months after
Wow.
um, I moved here. So yeah, I mean, to your question, I think if you're just laser focused,
Mm,
I mean that's the secret. I was just laser focused. I was not willing to get no for an answer, and I just said I'm gonna do it.
that's
There's no
awesome.
reason why I can't do it if so and so did it. I was looking at other people that are still very successful, and I said they're not that much smarter than me. They're not that much motivated than me. I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
I
So
just went and did it.
yeah. So what was it that what led you into real estate, and then to get even more granular, what got you into multifamily specifically, especially if you had no knowledge about apartments or anything like that when you're from your time in Israel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was always drawn to real estate. In my past life in Israel, I was actually married. I was smart enough to get married when I was 19, and that's not the same husband that I have today. But when I was married back then, the guy's family actually, I think they still live here in the States, and they were in real estate. So I think one of
Okay.
them doesn't even know I exist, but I looked up to that guy. He started this huge real estate company and he was buying multifamily properties. And I said, and that was, he was my role model. And I said, you know what? That's what I want to do, because this is how you can break, the mold. This is how you can succeed. That's the example that I saw. That was the true success story. And he came to the States in the 70s without much money,
Wow.
and same almost same story. And I just said, hey, I can do it. And that's how I started thinking about real estate and understanding that this is the path to become wealthy, to succeed on your own. You don't have to be rich. That was not the goal, but the goal is to really do something that can scale and that you can basically enjoy doing. So
Yeah,
that's one of the driving forces for me.
that's so good.
So, were you continuing real estate while you were continuing your education, like through college, or was it college? Stop the real estate, college. Was there a timeline with it, or is it consecutive
So I
or concurrent?
went, well, I got 2 degrees in law, and the focus was real estate law because I wanted to understand it from the legal point of view. And then when I had my MBA degree, I actually I took also classes. They have a very, very strong real estate program, but I also believe that if you want to be good at what you do, it's not necessarily the best thing to focus your education entirely on that. So if I only went and had a real estate degree or only focused on that, I think that my vision would have been very narrow. And now when I see when I see a deal where I'm thinking about a new project, I look at it from the legal point of view, from the business point of view,
Nice.
in addition. So it kind of gives me, I look at things a bit differently, and I see things that others miss if they only focus on real estate.
Got it.
That's a great way to look at it. You kind of open your eyes and broaden your view of
Yeah.
things. That's a pretty unique
Yeah,
way.
look at all the different moving parts that
Yeah.
are
Hmm.
that make up a deal and everything that goes along with it. That's cool.
Yeah.
What was the first so obviously to buy a large apartment building you have to have money. So how did you what what did you do to get around that?
Well, you have to have money and you don't. When you're a
It's kind
syndicator
of where I was going
like
with
me,
that.
yeah, exactly. So it's when you're a syndicator like me, you're basically, you find a deal, you negotiate with the seller, and you raise money from investors. And so you're not limited to how much money you have. And then you manage the asset. And so you get some of the equity and, some of it you give to investors. You do need to have some money or work with someone that has access to capital and can at least lend you the money, because even though you raise all the funds from investors, let's say it's a $10 million deal and you raise 3 million and 7 million you borrow from Fannie Mae, let's say, it doesn't mean that you can start it with zero money, because for two reasons. One, there's still upfront costs that you have to have someone, either your money or someone else's money. For instance, there are all kinds of fees you need to pay for the lawyers, for the lender, for during the due diligence process. So it can be as high as $500,000 or even $1 million. Sometimes can be as low as 50K, depending on the size of the deal. But if you don't have that money, you need to understand before you go into it, what are the upfront costs. And if you don't have access, you need to work with someone. There are people out there that lend money or pay that and get it, it's money that you get reimbursed after you close.
Hmm.
And then
Right.
those people that are out there can, they take a fee or a piece of the equity for that. That's the one piece why you need to have some money. The other piece is that to reach investors, it takes a little bit of an investment. I hired a small team on a budget, and I had one person when I started, and they helped me put content on social media, schedule meetings with investors, because you can do it by yourself, but then it's going to be hard to find a deal if you want to do it all. So
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in the deals, and to make one close, and that's like you said, if you're focusing on one thing, you're going to miss out on the other thing.
yep.
So how did you build your network of investors? I mean, were you going out to coffee shops and just randomly talking to people, meetups? How was that getting built?
So I basically started, I created a thought leadership platform. It didn't start in one day. I did I basically focused on one aspect and then moved and did other aspects. I started, first thing you have to have is a website. You have to have a place where investors can look you up, can read about you. It's extremely important. And then after that, I started writing a weekly blog, and I posted the blog all over social media. So basically, investors who wanted to read about it had to go to my website, how to click on the link and reroute it to my website. And it's always, when I create content, I think, who is my audience? Will they want to read this? I don't just blab about real estate. I'm talking specifically about multifamily investments through passive investors' eyes, because it's something that they would want to read about. So I give out content, for free. That's how I started with a blog. And investors, they just went to ellieperlman.com and they can read the blog there. Then I did a podcast. My podcast is Ready to Scale, where I interview, investors and syndicators. And so that was the second part. And then, it grew
Nice.
from there to different kind of aspects. So that's how I expanded my reach. And I have investors that reach out to me through my website asking to speak with me. I found that going to conferences and meetings, unless you organize the meetup like I have a meetup here in Santa Monica. Um, it's really, you don't really leave with 5 or 10 leads.
Right.
It's really hard to do. So you need to, for me, I stopped going to conferences at some point and focused only on creating value, so investors can find me, read about me, and then reach out to me. And that's the likelihood of someone investing with you after they reached out to you is much, much higher than bumping into a random passive investor, at a conference.
Yeah, that's
That's
exactly right. I mean, what are some of those things that you did to try to resonate with a passive investor? What is some of that content that you put out there that provided value to them?
So I would talk about how to analyze a deal through a
Okay.
passive investor's eyes. For instance, so you get a package from a sponsor. What are the things you should be looking at? how, for instance, how to choose the best markets, just so they know which markets are good to invest in.
Got it.
Stuff like that, how to vet sponsors, where to find them, understand a little bit more about financing. Again, they don't need to know everything because they're passive after all, but they need to know enough to evaluate whether this is a good deal or not.
Right.
That's awesome. So can we dive deep into your first deal? Can you tell us a little bit about how that went, how you found it, closed it, some hurdles along the way,
Yeah.
and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a fun story. I was working with a property management company, and that's another tip for those who want to start syndicating. Get your team ready before you have a deal, because once you have a deal, you have no time to build a team.
Right.
That's
So
right.
I was already working with a property management company, and they sent me information about this deal and said, "Hey, we think this is a great deal. You should look at it." And I did. And I submitted an offer, and it was, so usually you submit an offer, there's a deadline, you submit an offer, and then about a week later there's best and final call, which means that those who made the cut are actually moving to the next stage, the next part in the process, and then they have a call with the seller. And it was about 5 of us moving forward, and I was really excited about the deal. It was in a very, very solid market. It was a beautiful property, very easy value add deal. And I had a mentor at that point, and I called my mentor and I said, "Hey, I'm in the best and final of this deal. I'm really excited about it. I know it's a great deal. Let's talk." I wanted him to give me some tips about how to actually get this deal.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a silence on the phone, and this guy says, well, we're in the best and final.
Oh, no.
I was just
deal.
thinking.
Oh, no.
And yeah, and I said, well, okay. I mean,
Yeah. Good
we
luck
can't
to
really
you,
talk
buddy.
about
Yeah.
it. Well, I
That
can't really
is
talk to you
so
about it.
funny.
Yeah, and that's how it would happen. And we talked about other things, but we couldn't talk about this deal. And at the end, the seller was trying to decide actually between us, Blue Lake, and my mentor's company, and decided to go with him.
Mm.
And so before the broker had a chance to call me and say, "Hey, the seller decided to go with someone else," my mentor called me and asked, he said, "Do you want a partner?" And
Cool.
my ego was bruised because I really wanted.
Sure.
He said, "We got the deal. Do you want a partner?" And I said, "I need a minute to think about it." It took me a minute and a half, and then I said, in business, what I've learned is
Right.
that keep your emotions out of it. Keep your gut instincts, but emotions are bad for business. And I said, "Yeah, I'm in." And so I partnered with him on this deal, and that's how I did my first deal.
And so that's really cool. That's so funny. What are the odds of that,
Yeah.
What was your role? What did he bring you in to do?
So I was basically helping with capital, with investor relations.
Got it.
I was looking into the valuation of the deal as well. And the funny thing is that the deal was appraised exactly at the price that I've, you know, my offer was exactly on the dollar, was the appraisal.
Wow.
So I
So
bet that gave you some
was,
confidence in your skills and analyzing
oh
deals,
yeah.
and that's awesome.
Yeah. I knew it was a good deal. I
Yeah.
knew it in my heart. I knew it. I looked at the numbers, and I'm a very, very conservative, investor. So if the deal worked with my numbers, I knew it was a solid deal. So.
Very cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, Brandon.
Yeah. So he put you in charge of investor relations. So talk about, your first time raising money for a deal. How did people trust you, or were there people that kind of was like, well, you're new.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
how big was the raise?
So in total, that was less than $1 million for this deal.
Okay.
But there were other partners in the deal. I wasn't there on my own, which was nice. I was ready to raise for the entire deal if I got it. But in terms of, how you get there, because when you just start, you don't really have a lot of experience. Well, it depends. So I had experience as a lawyer, as a real estate lawyer and a property manager. I was also investing passively. And so it's not that I came with zero experience,
Right.
but for those who start and they do something completely different and then just dive into real estate, if you partner with someone experienced, you can borrow their experience and say, hey, this is what I do now. I'm partnering with this guy or that, person. And then your lack of experience becomes irrelevant.
That's
Very
exactly
true. Yeah,
that's exactly true.
you
Yeah.
lean on the the older brother kind of thing, and
Yeah.
I did that with Brandon Stad, who's our CEO of our group. When we were first getting started, and I was meeting with people. I owned a few houses in the DC area, but in
Hmm.
terms of commercial, I didn't have anything. And so I would say that our CEO, he owns 9 office buildings, and they'd kind of perk up and they'd be like, oh wow, okay, and it
yeah,
was
and you know,
kind of took the focus off of me and my lack of experience. So that's so true. That's such a valuable lesson there.
so the tough question: how much were you able to raise? I mean, was there a set limit? You said there were other individuals in the group
Yeah.
that were raising. Was there kind of a set limit that you were allowed to raise?
Yeah. So usually, and this is not uncommon where some sponsors are working with others, with other partners. You're given a certain amount of money that you're obligated, to raise, but there's so much more than that, because it's not only raising capital. It's you can take part of the asset management. You
That's right.
are in charge of investor relations, and it's very important to understand that, because you got to make sure that you're not only raising money because
Hmm.
this is not, you got to be, that's the lawyer in me speaking.
Yeah, no,
You
Exactly.
got
very
to do
true.
things
It's a
right.
hot
You got to do
topic
things
now
right.
in the multifamily
Yeah.
world. It is. It
Yeah,
definitely is. So
exactly.
You don't want to mess with the
Exactly.
SEC.
no.
No,
Yeah, that's
no.
exactly right. So after it closed, you raised some money for it, and were able to manage some investors in that. How
Hmm.
was it doing, and where'd you go from there?
It's doing great. I mean, we're achieving the returns that we've projected. Things are going well. And since then, it kind of snowballed, from there. We bought more properties since then. It's in Texas, Florida, and Georgia. That's where I like to purchase properties. It's usually B and C plus,
Okay.
very light value add. So those who don't know, a B property is basically in a decent neighborhood. It can be 20 to 30 year old building. And C class is maybe older than that, in an okay neighborhood. Doesn't, it could be also in a great neighborhood, but it's slightly older building. It could be maybe with a flat roof, something that looks a little bit more dated. And A buildings, which is what I'm not buying, is the high end, you know 1999, 2000, well, probably newer than
Yeah, I
that.
was gonna say
Yeah.
it's probably starting
Those,
to, we're almost in
yeah,
20. Yeah,
nice.
I mean,
2000, and actually, yeah, no, 2010 and above. That I would say that's
Your
a
A
class A
product.
building.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then your
which
D
I say.
product, I assume you stay away from too, the stuff in the hood.
Yeah, I try not to go. I mean, if I need to take a gun to collect rents,
yeah,
I'm
Exactly.
trying to avoid that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, no, that's really cool. So what are some of those deals? Can you give us some more about just what you've been able to do from there, and
Hmm.
and some more stories in terms of deals?
Yeah, so we close on a deal every 3 to 5 months on average.
No, nice. That's a lot.
Usually, yeah, and I have a team that helps me. I don't do everything on my own, which is good. We have assets that are usually 100 units and above.
Okay.
So 200 is kind of our sweet spot. I think 100 is a little bit too small, but if the deal is good, then we'll do it. Um, and yeah, I mean, the latest acquisition was in Atlanta. Very, very interesting deal. But this is we focus now on, taking over and turning the units and implementing the business plan, which is basically do light renovation, which we're going to start very soon, and
Very cool.
move on to the next deal.
So what made it, you said it's interesting. Why? I want to know why.
It's interesting because we found out 48 hours before closing, which means that the lender is ready with the money. We signed on everything. Due diligence period is over, and we're ready to wire the funds to the seller. We discovered that the occupancy was lower than it was
Oof.
a month ago.
Mm.
So it was interesting because we had to convince the lender to keep the loan, even though it shouldn't have been qualified for the loan, because they have certain standards in terms of occupancy.
Right.
And so that was a little nerve wracking, but it turned out to be fine. We had a really good lender, which is, it's so important to work with a good lender. He vouched for us, and he basically said, we trust them. We trust this operator, and, recommended that the loan would stay. So basically we kept the loan, which was good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I went back to the seller though, and I said, hey, dude, you should have told us about this. We shouldn't
Yeah,
have,
seriously.
found
Yeah.
out. Why am I finding out about this, last minute? So we're able to also get a certain credit or discount, whatever, however you see it,
Nice.
on the price, because this is, was, for me, was unacceptable. So, but I knew I had, I wanted to close. My investors were waiting for the close. If that was a bad deal, I would have just, leave the deal and return everyone, their money. But
Right.
I was really, for me, yes, we had a little blip, but the plus, the good thing about this whole situation is that we got a certain reduction in price. We have more units that we can renovate faster now, and
Awesome.
bring, increase the revenue pretty quickly. So
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good way to look at, something that, it's a good way to look at a bad situation, not necessarily a bad situation, but make more positive out of the negative. Oh, okay, we got more vacant units. So it means we can turn them around faster without having to wait for people to move out and things like that.
Yeah. And it sounds like you made it sound very simple in terms of the occupancy. What was it? Did it dip below 90? Is that?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So agency debt, Fannie Freddie, they like the occupancy to be 90% or above. And sometimes sellers, I've heard somebody say this before, they get seller's coma, where they just kind of check out from management of the property when they're getting ready to sell it, because it's no longer going to be theirs, and they just kind of don't care. It's like when you have senioritis when you're about to graduate. But that has killed deals before, and you made it sound a lot simpler than I'm sure it was.
It was not.
And, yeah, exactly. So that's kudos to you for being able to weather that storm and just find a solution to what is normally a deal killer, or at least a something where it kills the returns, and you got to get bridge financing and all of that. So kudos to you. That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my life, I mean, my motto in life is that there's always a good, there's a good spin on every dicey situation. And if I've looked at my life, my circumstances where I came from, growing up very poor, and, I would have, I never like to dwell in the negative, and always look for what's a positive. So yeah, I grew up poor. I didn't have anything, but that created the fire in me to build this company, to grow it to $1 billion company. And so that's a
awesome.
positive
You said
thing. I would
billion,
not
right?
change it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's insane.
That's
I
within
said the
5
B
years.
word.
Yeah. Hey, and I repeated it because I wanted the listeners to hear that you said the B word, and
I love that.
That's within
Oh,
5 years.
Let's just make it clear. This is my goal. I'm not there yet.
Oh, to make it $1 billion.
To make it $1 billion company. Yeah.
Well,
I'm
That's
on my
okay.
way though.
Wow, you
Yes.
said it. You said
Yeah,
it
you
here,
said
so
it.
you got to follow through on it.
Yeah, we're holding
I
you
know that
accountable.
And I'm
that's
sure you
part
will.
of the plan.
Yeah.
That's part of the plan. When you say it, out loud, you're more committed to it because hey, I said it.
Yeah.
Now I
There's
really have to
people
make sure
people
I
that
did.
hear it, so they're holding you to it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
That's
I
awesome.
love it. Well, I was going to ask, and I'm sure Brandon was too. We are going to ask what your goals were and moving forward, what your vision was, but you kind of just answered it. But is there anything else on the immediate horizon that you're kind of working on and going to come out with soon? I know you mentioned that you have a coaching platform as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah, I have a mentoring program called Ready to Scale, and it's really for people who want to build a syndication business and scale it and grow it as fast as I did.
Very cool.
But, my goal is I used to have a goal in terms of number of doors I wanted to own, but then I didn't want to feel pressured to, buy doors, more doors if it didn't make sense because the economy, we're in
Right.
a very, very strong economy right now, but it's also very competitive out there.
That's
So
right.
we're okay waiting for the right deal to come. Um, but yeah, I know in my program, I teach people exactly, how I did things, kind of a blueprint, step by step. This is what I've done. This is what you can do. We share all the spreadsheets that I'm using and all the tools that I'm using, the websites, the service
That's
providers.
huge.
Yeah, just to make it easier for people.
Love
So
that.
you mentioned that you scaled so fast. What can you kind of accredit your success in the scaling, within the 5 years to? Is it your burning passion to just get things done and do it, or what else was there?
So partially, but this is it's a you know when you have this desire to do things, it can backfire because you're gonna drown in an endless to-do list, and it's
Mhm.
not necessarily the things that produce value, the highest value, producers. So I think, having a team is actually what contributed to my success the most. And I started with not much money, so I was working on a budget. Um, but there are ways out there to hire a team. You can start with one person, then two, then grow it slowly. People who can take away those mundane, all those tasks that you don't have to do. And then the question that I'm asking every week, I'm revisiting that question. What is the most important thing I need to focus on? And if
Mm,
it's speaking with investors or putting my face in front of more investors, that's what I do. If it's getting the next deal or focusing on on the deal we just bought, on turning the units and implementing the business plan, this is what I do. So every week it changes, but the focus still has to be on one thing, and that's the focus this week. And this is where I actually saw a huge jump over doing multiple things, trying to do all of them and not really doing any of them very well. So I think focus is the right
love
thing. And I
that.
was inspired by a book called The One Thing
I
by
was just gonna ask that.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Good old Gary
by
Keller.
Gary Keller. He's the one, and he kind of changed my approach because he was saying that he tried to grow his company, which is huge, and he couldn't for the longest time. He was plateauing, and then he basically realized he was not focusing on one thing or multiple stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's true. And I know I keep jumping around, but listening to everything you're saying, and it pops up questions in my head. But so you keep mentioning that you got your team. How many are on your team, and what are kind of the jobs that you have them separated out as in your team?
Sure. So I have about 5 people. Part of my team is on the marketing side. So they help with investors. They help putting content out there, scheduling meetings with investors. And then the other part is the acquisitions team. So these people help me underwrite deals, sourcing deals. And then once there's something that looks good, then I get involved, and then, I take it from there. Um,
Nice.
but basically, they help me do all the things because everything that I allocate to them, I ask myself, do I absolutely have to do this, or can someone else do it for me?
Hmm.
Because there's so many hours in the day, I can't,
That's
stretch
right.
myself over 40 hours a day. So speaking with investors, that's at this point in my career, that's invaluable. They want to speak with me because they invest in me and with me.
Yep.
I can't have someone else talk to them. Um, but running numbers for deals initially before I go over it, that's something someone else can do.
Bingo.
Post my content all over social media and manage that. Someone else can do it. So that's basically how I operate.
Love that.
Find what's most valuable for your time, like you said, and spread it out through other people for the rest.
That's how you scale.
Yeah.
Or else you're
Exactly.
gonna go insane.
Yeah, I know. I was going insane almost, but this is part of my MBA education, just understanding, how to scale a company, how to brand it, how to raise capital. All those things are things that I also learned, when I was there.
Awesome.
So I got another question. So you said you don't really, at first you wanted to count doors, but then you kind of switched into the different mentality of the valuation of the business. So, where you're at now, however you're tracking it, whether doors or, valuation, what's the company at for?
Like what you're asking, what metric?
Yeah. I mean, how many doors you at? What's the value of your business or the real estate assets that you own?
Yeah. So we have over 2,000 doors.
Wow.
I think over
within 5 years. That's awesome.
I think over 250 million worth of real estate. And so, but then again, once we sell, this number kind of, changes a bit.
Right. It's always a fluctuating number.
Yeah. But again, I'm trying not to stick to the number of doors because, if I wanted to purchase 1,000 doors in 1 year, you might not find 1,000 doors with a price tag that makes sense. So you need to kind of, make sure you're buying right and not necessarily buying the right amount of doors you want to own.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if someone's goal is to get to 10,000 doors, it's probably fairly easy to get to 10,000 doors. However, you're probably not going to be making any money or they're going to be bad deals. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
That's right. Well, you're at 250 million. You got 750 to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But when you scale, it's a lot, it's a lot easier.
That's right.
I already have a roadmap. Right. I know when I'm going to get there. And I can tell you this is not my final number.
Yep. So. 0 to 1 is the hardest.
So
absolutely.
When you get to 1 billion, let us know and we will bring you back on and we will have a huge celebration for 1 billion because that's awesome.
Good deal. Good deal.
Yeah. So, but Ellie, I think we're going to jump into our moments of truth segment here. It's the same 7 questions we ask all of our guests. And I'm going to lead it off with the first one. Who is your success role model?
My success role model. Wow. That's a difficult one. Can we get to that at the end?
Sure.
I need to choose. So that's not easy.
No problem. What's your biggest success?
My biggest success was closing my first deal.
Love it.
Yeah. And that first one, like you said, snowballs into more and more and more. And then soon you'll be at 1 billion. So what's a typical day for you look like?
Typical day, there's no typical day, but I'm probably chatting with my assistant in the morning.
What time do you wake up?
Deals. I wake up at 7.
Okay.
I go to bed at 1, maybe 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I like to work at night.
It's You're a night owl.
Yeah, because people don't email me at night, and so
that's
I have time
very
to
true. There's a lot less going on at night.
That's right.
So I get a lot done during the nighttime. But yeah, then look at deals, speak with investors, do something like what I do now, record, and dinner with the husband, spend time with him, and then go back to work.
Love it.
That's awesome.
I love it. What's your favorite quote?
My favorite quote. Oh, that's a tough one. My favorite quote is "Every day is a Monday."
Oh, can you explain that a little bit?
My Sundays are Mondays. My Saturdays are Mondays. I work every day because I love it.
You just grind. Yeah.
But I love it. I enjoy it. It doesn't feel like work. That's the thing. That's why I know that I'm doing the right thing because it doesn't feel like work.
Amen. Yeah. It's that cliche thing. If you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life.
But I'm living it. So,
That's
Sunday,
cool.
what's better than improving my business or doing something fun? I enjoy it. So.
Why waste 2 days of good work days on the weekend, right?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
what are some of your hobbies other than working?
Some of my hobbies. I like skiing. I like surfing. That's a new thing I just picked. I started. Um,
Nice.
I used to read a lot, but then law school came and ruined that for me because it was so much to read. Now I don't have that much patience,
Yeah.
but I'm trying. But ski is my biggest love. That's true. That's the truth.
Awesome.
So
Nice. Well, this you might not be able to answer this, but what is the best business book that you've read
um
before you got to law school when you actually read?
um best business book, I would say Influence. It teaches you how to influence people, and how to get what you want to get in, how to give back and get more in return. So I think Influence is a big one.
Awesome.
And do you know who that's by? If not, not usually. We'll look it up.
I forget.
Yep,
Yeah, we
not a
can
problem.
Google it. No biggie.
And usually this will be the last question, but we're not forgetting about the first one that you passed on. We won't let you forget that.
Yeah.
But if there was one key piece of advice you could leave our listeners with about achieving success, what do you think it would be?
I think I'm a huge believer in mindset. And I think if you believe you can do it, that's what you're going to tell yourself. That's what's going to happen because I think everything starts with a thought. Thoughts are, become words and words become actions. So unless if you don't believe in yourself, then you're probably not going to succeed. It's whatever you're going to say in your head, that's what's going to happen. And it happened to me so many times, that I'm a huge believer in mindset. So get your mindset right, work on it. It's kind of, sometimes you need to convince yourself before you see results, and just do it. I mean, that's it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, jumping back to the first question.
So the first one,
Yeah.
yes.
Who's your success role model?
Success role model, I would have to say Sam Zell. He started also from nothing. Was grinding with his partner for many years. He owns a very big REIT today, so he's my role model. I read a book about his life, fascinating.
Yeah.
I think the book called
Cool.
Am I being loud enough or something, or am I being clear enough, something like that. I forget the name of the book, because he's very, very direct, and he also predicted the 2007 crash. And so I think he's a fascinating person to follow. He's my ultimate role model. I have a few more, but he's definitely one of the top ones.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Ellie, how can our listeners get in contact with you? How can, if someone's listening and they're like, man, I want to invest with her, how can they
Or your
do all that?
coaching,
Yeah.
your coaching platform.
Sure. So you can find information about my coaching program and about investing with me on www.ellieperlman.com, and Ellie is Ellie. If you just Google my name, Ellie Perlman, you're probably going to see my website there.
Yeah, it's the first thing that pops up. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you go to my website, you can see, if you're a passive investor, we're given a free, a free guide on the 5 most critical things you need to look at a deal. So if you want to learn what are those 5 things that you have to understand, you can, again, go to my website, ellieperlman.com, and you can download the guide.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, Ellie, we appreciate you being on today and providing all the value. And I think there's probably some listeners out there that can relate. And if not, I think you've given them a reason to really not make any excuses to not get anything done. So we appreciate you being on today. But
thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to this show so that you're not missing any of our multifamily Mondays, and join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/wealth junkies. Again, Ellie, we appreciate you being on today.
Yep. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you, guys.